somewhere in a Warner Brothers vault sits a tape of a John Woo-directed Lost in Space. Somewhere else, there are shots of Kevin Bacon fighting graboids again at 59. These aren't fan edits, they're real pilots, fully shot and ready for air, that got killed at the very last step. Every year, networks greenlight dozens of pilots that vanish into studio vaults forever, never to be seen again. Until now. Because today we're digging up 10 sci-fi pilots from the 2000s and 2010s that never made it to air, why they died, and why some of them honestly deserve better. Star Patrol. Before the Orville proved a loving Star Trek spoof could work, Fox tried something similar with Star Patrol. The pilot followed Captain Omega and his ragtag Space Rangers, a crew that included humans, aliens, and a sentient brain floating in a jar. The production even borrowed special effects talent and costumes from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, giving the parody a surprisingly polished look for a comedy pilot. But Fox ultimately passed, and Star Patrol quietly disappeared into the abyss. Critics who later tracked it down called it fan-friendly comedy clearly aimed at Trekkies rather than a mainstream audience. The Time Tunnel. In 2002, Fox dusted off Irwin Allen's 1966 time travel series for a considerably darker reboot, ditching the campy tone for something closer to the grittier Battlestar Galactica reimagining that would arrive 2 years later. The setup? A Department of Energy fusion experiment triggered a time storm that scrambled 240 minutes of history, leaving the present altered in strange ways. Reversed traffic light colors, only 49 states, and the Soviets winning the race to the moon. A recruited team had to dive back into the past to undo the damage. Reportedly, Fox chose to greenlight Firefly instead, so this show never advanced past the pilot stage. The Robinsons, Lost in Space. The WB commissioned this ambitious reboot of the 1965 classic, hiring action director John Woo to reimagine the Robinson family for a new generation. Set in 2097, the pilot cast patriarch John Robinson as a decorated war hero rather than a scientist, still processing an alien invasion he'd defeated years earlier. The story added an older son, David, whose death during an attack on the family's colonizing mothership set up a much bleaker premise than the original ever attempted. The WB ultimately declined to pick it up, and pieces of the elaborate Jupiter 2 set were later repurposed for the Pegasus on the rebooted Battlestar Galactica. Global Frequency. Adapted from Warren Ellis's cult comic, this WB pilot introduced Miranda Zero, the enigmatic leader of a covert network of 1,001 specialists who mobilize via modified phones whenever conventional authorities failed. The pilot condensed the comic's premise into a tense single episode centered on a satellite weapon crisis. The network ultimately declined to order a series, but the story didn't end there. A screener copy leaked onto the internet in June 2005, becoming one of the earliest examples of a TV pilot spreading virally online. Ellis said the leak itself soured the studio on the project, cementing its fate as a cult favorite that never got a second chapter. Babylon Fields. Years before The Walking Dead redefined the undead on television, CBS quietly shot a pilot about the deceased residents of a small town, Babylon, New York, waking up and simply trying to resume their old lives. The tone leaned into dark comedy rather than horror, exploring how families reacted when a father, a husband, or a neighbor returned from the grave with old wounds, literal and emotional, still fresh. CBS passed on the project without much explanation, but the pilot leaked online and quickly developed a cult following among horror fans who recognized how ahead of its time the concept really was. The buzz was so strong that NBC ordered a fresh pilot from the same creative team in 2013, hoping to capitalize on the zombie boom. But that version never made it to camera either, leaving Babylon Fields dead twice over. Area 57. NBC's answer to Alf swapped the sitcom's puppet for Paul Reubens playing a wisecracking, thoroughly unpleasant alien held in a secret desert facility for 40 years. Matthew Lillard starred as the newly assigned colonel tasked with managing both the extraterrestrial and a dysfunctional staff who clearly resented the assignment. The workplace comedy leaned on the culture clash between military bureaucracy and an alien who refused to cooperate or take anything seriously. Despite a cast that also included Jane Lynch and Bruce McGill, NBC never gave it a series order. The pilot eventually made its way online, where it's remembered as an odd but genuinely funny curiosity from the mid-2000s sitcom landscape. Boldly Going Nowhere. Created by the trio behind It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, this Fox pilot transplanted their brand of dysfunction onto a spaceship a century and a half in the future. Captain Ron Teague commanded the RC-7, a vessel whose glamorous mission amounted to hauling moon rocks, while he privately dreamed of real exploration. The humor leaned crude and character-driven rather than plot-heavy, essentially imagining Star Trek run by the gang from Patty's Pub. Reports at the time suggested Fox was seriously close to picking it up before the project got shelved for extensive rewrites. The pilot sat unreleased for over a decade until it finally surfaced online in 2022. Day 1. This NBC project was meant to fill Hero's time slot after the show ended, with a serialized mystery about apartment neighbors in Van Nuys banding together after a global catastrophe leveled cities and left behind strange black spires. What began as a planned 13-episode order kept shrinking, first to 4 episodes, then to a single TV movie, before NBC quietly abandoned it altogether. Network executives cited concerns about sustaining the show's mythology, despite reportedly spending heavily on production. Unlike many pilots on this list, Day 1 never leaked anywhere, making it one of the most genuinely lost entries in the unaired pilot canon. The After. Marking Chris Carter's first television project since The X-Files, this Amazon pilot followed 8 strangers thrown together as society collapsed around them, with a mysterious creature lurking at the story's edges. Amazon released the pilot for public viewing in February 2014 and used audience feedback to greenlight a full 8-episode season the following month. Carter modeled his ambitions on Dante's Inferno, envisioning 99 total episodes to mirror the poem's 99 cantos. Despite the initial order, Amazon reversed course in January 2015 and canceled the project without shooting a single additional episode, citing creative differences over tone and direction. Tremors. 25 years after starring in the original creature feature classic, in this sci-fi pilot, Kevin Bacon returned to play an older, more world-weary Val McKee. It was envisioned as a direct follow-up to the first film that would ignore the events from the franchise's many sequel movies entirely. The story caught up with Val struggling with alcoholism and a lingering hero complex a quarter-century after his first run-in with the Graboids. By most accounts, the pilot tested exceptionally well with audiences, which made Sci-Fi's decision to pass in April 2018 all the more baffling to those involved. Bacon announced the cancellation personally on social media. Honorable mentions. And before we close the book on this list, here are a few more pilots that deserve a quick shout-out. Stephen Bochco, the mind behind NYPD Blue, tried a genre spin on his own formula with NYPD 2069, following a detective who's cryogenically frozen after a near-fatal accident and wakes up 66 years later into a police-state future, awkwardly partnered with his own grandson on the force. Around the same time, the WB was chasing a superhero hit with Ultra, based on a graphic novel pitched as a superhero riff on Sex and the City, though the pilot starring Lena Headey stripped out most of that wit in favor of a heavily narrated brooding hero formula. Then there's Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, which took the cheerful 1976 Croft superhero duo and reimagined Electra Woman as a bitter, chain-smoking has-been dragged out of retirement by a superfan who becomes her new sidekick. And rounding things out is Shotgun Love Dolls, an MTV pilot about an ordinary teenager transported into an alternate universe to join an all-girl crime-fighting squad. A footnote today mostly because of who's in it, with early appearances from Rachel McAdams and Malin Ackerman well before either became a household name. Did we miss a buried sci-fi pilot that belongs on this list? And which of these pilots do you think deserved a real shot? Sound off in the comments. If you enjoyed digging through the wreckage with me, head over to tvshowpilot.com for more TV deep dives, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lost show we dig back up.